Ron Lane, I found out about his product All Phase as a possible solution to help us with the problem of peach leaf curl. Who's got peach leaf curl on their trees every year?
If the tree's still dead, can I raise my
I'm not sure if it's that good, but we'll ask Ron about that. If we can revive a dead
Oh, I
tree
just
with
meant it's okay to raise my hand.
Oh yeah, I've killed some too. Yeah, I know what you mean. Especially, I find it problematic. I think nectarines seem to be even more susceptible to diseases like brown rot and peach leaf curl. Anyway, but I was excited to hear about this, and I was doing some research, and I wanted to track down some sources of it. And I knew you could order it online with free shipping. Is that still the case? You can order it online with free shipping directly from Ron. I wanted to go to and talk to somebody about it at a store, so I called up a place in Sonoma County, mostly marijuana growing places. They have a lot of hydroponic supplies, and they were carrying this product. And so I called him up, and I was talking to the owner of the store. I said, "Hey, do you have this all phase stuff? You know, for I'm trying to use it for peach leaf curl and diseases and stuff." He says, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, the guy who manufactures it here in the store. You want to talk to him?" And so they handed me the phone, and that's the first time I got to chat with Ron. And I was super excited about it because I think that we want to use the least toxic things, and we'll talk about that, but also things that work. We don't want to waste our time with stuff, you know? So what this is going to show us today, I want to learn more about this with Ron is, tests that I know Tom Addison has been using. Tom has been quite a proponent of experimenting with this in the backyard scale, because we're going to find out it's been used on the broad scale effectively. And so I'm really interested to hear more. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Ron Lane.
Okay, so I'm Ron, and I've been in agriculture pretty much my whole life. I graduated from Humboldt State University many years ago with degrees in botany and forest management. The forest industry took a dive, so I got into agriculture. I think it's on the previous slide, but that greenhouse right there, I put together a business plan to build that, and I got Louisiana Pacific to build it for me. And the idea was to use waste heat from their sawmill dry kilns, pump it through the greenhouses to heat the greenhouses, and they could grow vegetables. So I didn't own it, but it was like being an entrepreneur, you know. And I partnered with a guy who was a very good horticulturist. He taught me a ton of things. And we ran this for a number of years. I put together a pest control program there back in the early 80s, where we were able to grow pesticide-free greenhouse cucumbers and tomatoes and lettuce and peppers, which was kind of hard to do at the time. And in order to do it, I had to build an insectary in there to raise parasitoid wasps and these leaf miner parasitoids and aphid parasitoids. And I got help from UC Riverside and from the Albany USDA research station, just up the road, a guy named Ken Hagan, super helpful. But I put together a biocontrol program way back in the day, and we were able to sell pesticide-free produce. We marketed through this NutriClean. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
But Rayleigh's and Nob Hill and
Tested clean.
Yeah, right. So you would have to tell them exactly how you grew your crop, and then they would do random sampling and testing of your product to guarantee that it was free of pesticides. So we, got recognition by Chefs of America as being one of America's best producers. And I was actually you can't read this stuff, but I was vice president of the American Greenhouse Vegetable Growers Association. I started the California Greenhouse Vegetable Growers Association. And, it was a pretty impressive operation. Turned out Louisiana Pacific had bought a company called Fiberboard. And this was at a fiberboard mill site. So we got spun off with Fiberboard. And then fiberboard, they owned a company called Pabco, which was a leading asbestos manufacturer, which is why why fiberboard got spun off. And so then we ran it for a few years that way, but then fiberboard just sold everything off. So I put 8 years of my life into building this, and it was kind of crushing. And the CEO of fiberboard, we were going to go into business, but some community block grant money didn't come through, and I went to UC Davis, and I was at UC Davis 27 years in the plant sciences department, superintendent of agriculture, and I was heavily involved in safety as well. Like agricultural safety was one of my main goals, because I've sprayed everything. I've sprayed the skull and crossbone stuff. I've used methyl bromide. I've used even organic stuff like nicotine sulfate is pretty hot stuff, but my preference has always been to try to use the safer stuff. And one of my goals or one of the, I know a lot of problems that agriculture has. And so when I left the university, I wanted to focus on trying to find solutions to some of the problems. And let's see if I can. So sulfur was one of the things I didn't like. Okay, so we all think sulfur organic, it's perfectly harmless. Well, it's just not true. Okay, so in your yard, when you're the scale that you're using it, I don't see any problem with it. But for like when they started to take data on injuries of ag workers, sulfur was the number one cause of injury to ag workers in California, sending more people to the hospital than any other pesticide. And this is year in and year out. So California passed a law that they required a 24-hour reentry to try to curb the problems of sulfur. Then, like around 2017, a study was published by UC Berkeley where they had followed these families for 10 years living in the Salinas Valley, and there's a geo database of where pesticide applications are made. And so they correlated where people lived to this geo database on pesticides used. And they found that like children living within a half a mile of the application sites where these sulfur applications were going on had a statistically significant higher incidence of asthma and reduced lung function. And it was directly correlated with the number of sulfur applications made in their area. So, there were 10 applications, it was something like 100% more asthma. And I've worked with farm workers, they don't like sulfur, but my thing was always, I don't know what would be better. I mean, are they going to want benylate on there every couple weeks or Captan? I don't think that's good solutions.
When I think of sulfur as compared to the organophosphate type of pesticides, sulfur, you get an immediate, you can smell it, it's there. Some of the other ones are more subtle. They might work on your cancer.
So those are a
rates.
lot of the fungicides too. The organophosphates, they're a little faster acting, but they affect your nervous system and can outright kill you, But yeah, so there's sulfur, the way sulfur works is it reacts with the air. So sulfur in itself is non-toxic. We eat sulfur. It's part of our DNA. It's non-toxic. Sulfur doesn't kill anything. Sulfur reacts with oxygen in the air, and it does it at temperatures above 68 degrees. And the warmer it gets, the faster it reacts with oxygen, creating sulfur dioxide. Now, sulfur dioxide is very well recognized by the OSHA as being a problem for occupational workers, but farm workers don't get the same scrutiny. Um, so California recognizes sulfur dioxide as being on Prop 65 list. So of substances known to have cancerous or reproductive harm. So I did kind of read those studies that California came up with because I was kind of skeptical. And it looks like they have some pretty valid data there. So I've been heavily involved with safety, but being someone that used a lot of sulfur, I wanted to find a better way. What are you going to, give somebody an alternative?
Were you using the sulfur mostly for disease control or also for insect control?
Mostly disease control.
And how were you applying it? What were you using?
So, we'd apply it as a dust or as a spray, or at the university, we actually had greenhouses where we were vaporizing it, and,
But it's all elemental sulfur.
yeah, so yeah. But like when you're using it, like take the Salinas Valley, they're treating 100 acres all around you. That's a lot different situation than a few yards here and there using it. It's totally different. So you'd have to look at the Salinas Valley situation different than a few houses here and there. It's that gas is going to dissipate most likely without being a problem, So, but I'm thinking of big ag, and I'm thinking of the farm workers and people I've worked with, and so finding a sulfur alternative was one of the things I was looking to do. If you see also, aside just from this you can't read it, but this is showing sulfur at the very top of the list for reported poisoning cases in that time period. Here's a report: agriculture admits more sulfur than any other man-made source. That's including coal plants and everything else. So, I'm thinking that sulfur's good. We just use too much. It's like 50 million pounds in California alone.
A year.
A year. So, what if we had a good solution that's going to be affordable, that farmers could say go every other application? Then they cut it 50%. If we can make a 50% difference, that would be huge.
There's only like 35 million people in California.
Right.
That's like a pound per person of sulfur.
Well, and when it reacts with oxygen, it grabs the two oxygens, and it becomes like twice as much weight, so that 50 million pounds, now 100 million pounds. And, not all of it's going to gas, some of it's getting washed into the soil and can acidify the soil. Like if you are doing acidification for like your citrus, it's
Or
best not
blueberries
to
especially.
just toss it on top of the soil. It's going to off gas. Okay, it's not going to acidify. So, you got to work it into the soil if you really want to acidify. Like something I used to do, like with some just signature citrus trees, I'd get like a bulb planter and I'd drill a hole and I'd fill it with soil and out around the tree line. And that would acidify over several years. But if you just toss it on top, it's going to off gas. So don't do that.
Acidification is especially important for blueberries. They need a pH of 4.5 to 5. So that's good advice.
At some point in your talk, are you going to explain your logo?
Oh, that one right there, the hummingbird. You know, I just like hummingbirds. You should see my house. I have all these hummingbird feeders, and I swear at times I go through a gallon a day of sugar water, and and they would go through more, but I just don't put more than that out for them. But it's just that I like birds in general. I would love to have been an ornithologist. I just I like birds. So I just incorporated it into my logo. Um, they're just, well, like, have you ever held a hummingbird?
Yes, you can catch them.
Well, I've held them, you know. Oh, well, I even had one. I think they're smarter. This is way getting off the but you know, I always feed them, you know. And once I worked at Davis, and I had a 70-mile commute to Colfax up in the foothills. And I got home one time, and I walked around the deck, and I also put out some bird seed, and I had a container of bird seed, and I started to walk around to my back deck to where I had, you know, would put the seed out, and I saw a hummingbird. It kind of rose up from maybe from here to that wall away, and it was kind of flying weird. It was kind of upright and kind of doing this, and it was coming right to me, and I somehow knew it. I just held the cup here, and it landed right there in the cup, and it had a bee stuck on its beak. So it must have tried to eat, the bees sometimes go to the hummingbird feeders, and it must have stabbed it. But then the protein in the abdomen had bound its beak closed. So it couldn't get the bee free, so it couldn't open its mouth, and it knew it was going to die. And for some reason, it was intelligent enough to know that I could help it. And so I got the bee free, but I don't know. I like hummingbirds, but um, okay. So I ca it took a while. Like the first product I came up with was what I was thinking along the lines of a replacement for sulfur is maybe going with essential oils. Because he mentioned about some of my products being in cannabis stores or whatever. I had done some consulting. So I was at UC Davis, and there was a professor named Doug Gubler. He's a world famous plant pathologist. And he was trying to do an experiment for powdery mildew at a cannabis facility in San Jose, but they were screwing up the grow operation. So it was screwing up his experiment. So he asked if I could help him out. So I went to the place, and I could see that they weren't irrigating right. I could see they had some nutritional things going on. And so, I said, I could fix every problem they have here, but they're going to have to pay me. you know, because this was a place that had like Joe Montana in it, and they had massive amounts of money. So I kind of like, okay, I'll fix everything, and you got to pay me this much. And so I got it turned around pretty fast, and I noticed they were using a lot of essential oils, but I could see they were burning their plants. They would apply them so frequently, they would get a burn. And I know for like the research I'd take care of and whatnot, it would be totally unacceptable, you know. And then later, I got an idea on how to maybe make it so that the essential oil didn't harm the plant. And so that's this product right here. And we'll get to that one. But that was my first thought before the potassium. But then I started thinking that's kind of too expensive, the essential oil, to replace sulfur. So then I thought about the potassium sorbate. It's very broad spectrum. It's a food additive. It's, was first isolated from mountain ash berries in like the 1850s. It's been protecting our food for like 80 years. It's the most hypoallergenic of any of the food preservatives, so fewer people have a bad reaction to it. So I thought, if I could make that work in the field, that would be a pretty good thing. And I thought, well, what might help it work in the field better? I had some experience with polymers, and that the polymers can thicken the spray somewhat. and you get more deposition. So more of what you spray stays on the foliage.
Sticky.
Yeah, it's a little stickier. And so like if you've ever used wetting agents in your sprays, you might notice that they really break the surface tension of water. But if you use these, like if you take there's these water sensitive cards. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're like yellow, and they use them for seeing spray deposition in fields or whatnot. And so I would take like 5 micron drops of something with a surfactant in it, and you can see it does spread the droplet better, but things just run right off really fast. Now, so like humectant, it sticks. It stays on the card. And the other thing with the polymer is it takes a little longer to dry. So I figured part of the thing with, potassium sorbate would be having enough contact time wet against the target in order to do its job. And so I thought, okay, it's a polymer and it can increase that contact time. But
Carrageenan.
yeah, I don't know how you actually pronounce that. It's like a potato sort of thing. I know some people call it carrageenan. Um,
And that's your polymer.
that's the polymer, and one of the reasons I picked that is, have any of you used Google Scholar before? It's a great resource. So if you go to Google Scholar and you typed in carrageenan plant biostimulant, you would see that carrageenan has in several studies been shown to boost the plant's own immune system, and it also increased overall biomass that the crops produced. So it's derived from a sea algae. There's a few different species and different types of carrageenan or genin or whatever. So that was perfect too. And one of my concerns about the potassium sorbate was when you start looking at its modes of action, like that's how it works to control the fungus. It has like 8 or 9 different modes of action, but they're all act on respiration pretty much and cellular metabolism. So if it could possibly slow the plant's metabolism down, then that's not going to be viable sort of thing. So maybe the carrageenan could offset that. I didn't know. And so I did some tests where I grew out a bunch of vegetables from seeds and treated and non-treated. And, I couldn't tell any difference. So, I was hoping that one would be like way bigger, the one I treated. Uh, but there was no difference. So, but that's still cool. So I'm not stunting the plants, and it's a fairly affordable way to control diseases. The 20% potassium just had, because we're talking potassium sorbate. There's a potassium oleate is an emulsifier detergent that's in there. So it actually has a lot of potassium too. But when you're talking about putting it, 1 pound on an acre and only 20% of its potassium, it's still not a lot. But I wanted to be putting stuff good in agriculture because I'm used to, from 40 years in ag, putting out stuff that, you wouldn't want to eat it, and hopefully it breaks down in your environment. But I'd rather put stuff out there that's actually good for the environment.
That's in a lot of food, right? Carrageenan.
Yeah, it is. It's, like ice cream, for instance. A lot of ice cream will have yeah, it's a thickener. It changes the mouthfeel of some things. So, it all seems simpatico. Did my own testing, worked really well on like powdery mildew, which was a pretty easy test to do. Um, but some of the other ones were a little harder to test. But You can't read any of this, but, partly how, say that's a fungal mycelium right there. Uh, Potassium sorbate is known to break down the cell walls of fungi, so it can start compromising that. So one way it works in like controlling powdery mildew is it starts to, you know, fracture the wall, and then you get especially if you add a surfactant with this, then that reduces the surface tension. If water flows into the cell that much faster through osmosis, and you can actually explode the cell.
Selectively on the fungus, not on the plant tissue.
Yeah, right, right. So plants, they're cellulose based more, and fungi are more chitin based. So it's not going to harm the plant that way. So I did put it in some field trials, and here, this was the first field trial, and I knew it worked better with a surfactant, but I had it just in the field trial without any surfactant, and we had the same results as biweekly sprays of sulfur at 5 pounds per acre plus a surfactant, followed by Rally at 5 ounces per acre plus the surfactant, followed by Quintec at 6.5 ounces per acre, followed by Pristine, which really that's kind of the gold standard, or one of the gold standards, at 12.5 ounces per acre plus surfactant. So we had the exact same.
So over what time frame is that applied?
So this.
Weekly application, biweekly sprays with how many weeks?
So it was several weeks. It was started, and this is online too. So if you went, this was done by UC Davis. And
Every year they have a comparative field trials of probably a dozen different species of fungicides. And they mostly trial, I believe, was peaches.
well, so they do trials on all sorts of things.
So every department has those trials, and so it's certainly going to start at bloom, but how far into the fruit maturation stage is the question.
Yeah, I think it probably went about 8 weeks or.
8 samples, eight sprays.
But
Yeah.
And this is on fruit trees or?
No, this was on grapes. Yeah.
isn't it the case, though, we're told with peaches that the critical period is when the bud opens, and then after that, it's not so dangerous. Is that true?
So, with powdery mildew or.
Yeah. No. Peach
With
leaf curl.
you're
Peach
talking
leaf
about
curl.
like
Peach leaf curl.
So this isn't peach leaf curl, and we'll get on to peach leaf curl. But this was powdery mildew on grapes, and it was Chardonnay grapes, and this was over in Lodi. And Chardonnay are like the most susceptible variety to powdery mildew. So it did pretty well there. And so then this is at Cal Poly. This was a field trial on strawberries. And one of my concerns was, I still wanted to convince myself that I'm not stunting plants. So we went in at like 5 pounds per acre, like a super high rate. We didn't get any stunting, and no product beat us, period. Nothing from Bear Crop Sciences, nothing. But that was at a real high rate and with a surfactant. So,
How many grams per gallon equivalent would that be, more or less, would you say?
so that's like 20 grams. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And you can't really read that here, but this is our severity right there is 2.3. This lunisensation was just very slightly higher. Statistically, they were the same. But that's the hard chemistry the
We can start.
yeah, well, yeah, it's not household ingredients. you know. So we beat all the hard stuff at that high rate.
Also on grapes?
This was on strawberries.
Powdery mildew on strawberries, yeah.
So then I went in at 1/3 of a pound. That's like 2.5, or not even 2.5, like 2 grams per gallon. So with a wetting agent, and we were the second best in the trial. There's Luna Sensation did better than we did. But at that rate, we're at like $8 or $9 per acre. We're competitive with sulfur, so why do you need to spray sulfur every, week? You can switch it, you know. Um, so that was pretty cool. I think I would probably go with a little bit higher rate myself, but at that low rate, we did super well.
Does it have an acidifying effect at all? Or-
No, so okay, so this goes back to formulation. So I only tell you I mean, I can't spend all day talking about the formulation, um, but potassium sorbate. When you look at potassium sorbate and how it works, pH is very important to how well potassium sorbate works. So most of the studies where they've used potassium sorbate to test against, plant pathogen sort of things, they tend to go the acidic route. But actually, if you go the basic route, you get the same effect. So the more basic you get, the more highly effective potassium sorbate is. When it's neutral is where it's least effective. I chose going more basic because I think it's easier to get it basic. I think most people's water tends to be basic. So especially if you get something out of a well or whatever,
Especially in the Central Valley.
your water's already going to be basic. And if I tried to go the acidic way, I couldn't put enough acid in the product to neutralize, half the well water out there. So I went the basic route, which is the opposite of what everybody else goes. So it's basic. And if you mixed it with an acidic product, you're going to make it less effective.
Most of us here drink melted snow, so it's.
They're spoiled.
pH here is raised substantially to protect the pipes, and it runs between 8 and 9, and sometimes in some areas up to 10.
Yeah, so that's fine with this product, and the plants, my experience, they tolerate that pH really well, better than going down to 3 or something like that, So that's why I went with a high pH on this product. So he also tried it in a field trial on almond scab, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend the product for almond scale, but we did have a statistically significant reduction
In the middle of the road there, in the range of effectiveness of those different products.
So there's all these products of the biologicals, in general didn't do so great, but we've had the best of the biologicals. But it wouldn't be what I would say were great results. But if you were using it for, powdery mildew control or some other stuff, you get some incidental, reduction of the almond alternaria or whatever. And a lot of things are timing. So, if the timing's not right, it's not going to work. So, that could be playing into some of this as well.
These trials, though, are done on broad scale, hundreds of acres, consistently year after year after year, and they're comparing the effectiveness. And so it's a pretty good insight. It's going to be different in your own backyard, but it's really interesting information.
Yeah, so this is peach leaf curl. And so this was at 4 grams per gallon, and they added a surfactant to it because it does work better with their surfactant. And these other products, they mixed with 1.5% armory oil, which would be like a dormant type of spray oil. And so, we're here, and those are Cueva and Master Cop with the oil, and we're significantly less than that at that rate right there. So, I would probably go with a little higher
So to
rate.
be clear, Cueva is a copper-based product. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And some of the other ones are like Xerum, Bravo, and the combinations down there are more complex chemistry.
Well, these are not biologicals by any means.
That's what I'm saying.
So these are
Those are the big
harder.
guns.
And they're mixed with the oil. But we did quite a bit better than the copper did in the study. So, copper isn't used nearly to the degree a sulfur is, but when if you went to if you ever have pest control problems, go to the UCIPM website. It's a great website for helping you with pest control, diseases and insects and all that. But they do talk a little bit about copper can be a problem in peaches. When you're using it year after year after year, it can start accumulating in the soil. And you can get copper toxicity. And, if you had a more well-drained soil, that could be getting into waterways, et cetera.
It's going to affect the microbiology of the soil.
Well, it could affect the microbiology of the soil. They actually mentioned that on the UCIPM website. But it also can affect water quality. So drinking water, 1.5 parts per million is the maximum permissible level of copper. So it could get into aquifers and stuff like that too. But if you're not using it year after year after year, it's probably not going to build up.
Could you explain the count column there, the infections per tree? What does that mean? That's not the number of leaves that are infected. No, the number, the NO.
That one.
Yeah, what is that?
So of their sample size, they must take it. You would have a certain sample size that you were taking, 100 leaves or something.
Randomly picked off the tree, what percentage of the leaves would have an infection?
Gotcha.
So the control was half the leaves were infected.
Yeah.
Is what that's saying. 51.5% of the leaves had the disease as a control on top. And then the most effective was number 7, the Bravo Cueva combination only had 7% infected leaves. But our comparing it to Cueva, the copper one had 18.3 and Alphase had less by 3%, 3.5, or no, whatever that is, 2.5, 3.
Yeah, and I've seen, at higher rates, better results. One thing too, like when this.
So you're recommending maybe 8 grams per gallon instead of 4.
Yeah, that would probably.
And then what about the oil?
No, and actually we didn't know. So this last year, it turns out oil deactivates the potassium sorbate. So if you mix potassium sorbate with oil, this potassium sorbate doesn't work anymore. So this was last year, and
Does this say that you're applying it twice while the other products are being applied just once?
yeah, I did I think I do a pre-bloom. So
Popcorn stage before the flower opens. So you're looking at the buds swelling. Is this correct, Ron?
Yeah.
And you're seeing a little bit of color, but they're not open yet. So that's a great time to.
that's when, well, so like when I would be like had an experiment going on with peach trees or whatever, I actually hit them 3 times a year because I didn't want any peach leaf.
Talk about a fall. Often we'll talk about a spray this time of the year as the leaves are coming off, even while they're still on, around Thanksgiving time, which they're kind of in between right now. Get them now before the heavy rains start. And then we do another New Year's, and then we do another one at that popcorn stage in late February or so. That's kind of the standard.
Yeah, that's how I always did it.
And what is kinetic?
So that is a surfactant. It's a wetting agent that breaks the surface tension of water.
And I want to ask Tom also to contribute, because I know you've had your own experience using this product, and I know you've been excited about it, and you've done your own trials too. So at some point, it'd be great to hear about your experience with that too.
I mean, I used for peach leaf pearl. I used 6 grams per gallon, 7 grams per gallon. Tested different trees. Had quite good control at that. Probably would have had more control if I'd gone higher. The cost of the product is pretty nominal. I think that's kind of an understatement.
Because you're comparing it to
Copper or sulfur applications, you know, if you're making your own lime sulfur and doing things that are not really available to folks these days. You know, I think I probably under applied in terms of concentration for monolinea for apricot brown rot. I think I'll go up to maybe 8 or 9 grams per gallon. But I definitely had control and 6 grams per gallon of brown rot. So, you know, my experience is quite positive.
and that's there in El Cerrito.
Very high sort of fungal pressure area on both peaches and apricots. You know, I'm selling the fruit, so I want control. And you know, I think my sort of perspective is this is a great option for folks to get around limitations of sort of what your choices are now. So I'm enthusiastically supportive. So that's a fair
Which three applications
for peach leaf curl.
for your net?
It depends on what I'm spraying for, but for peach leaf curl, yeah, I'm usually 3.
The same 3 that he mentioned.
You know, I'm growing low chill peaches, and so my leaves are going to be on the trees much later than, you know, someplace where it's colder in the winter. That's a variety thing as well as a locational thing. And I'm not spraying, I mean, there's a variety of products that, you know, guys like Andy Mariani will spray to drop the leaves. I'm not doing that. I've got enough trees that I can't be stripping trees by hand or something. So I tend to not spray as early as Thanksgiving. I tend to be later, but it depends upon the variety and the years. And then I'll do a spray, you know, in early January and then one in February. Timing sprays. So I've got some distance, some time after I spray before rain comes. For me, for brown rot control and apricots, I spray kind of red bud to shucks split. And how many times?
Say that again. Red bud to
Like red bud to shucks split, like through the bloom, basically pre-bloom, early bloom, you know, like heavy bloom until the petals are just dropping and shuck split.
shuck split. So basically,
Shuck split.
in prunus, you're going to have the flower split open by the enlarging fruit. Is that what we're?
Yeah, exactly. When the petals are just dropping off, is
Yeah.
kind of shuck split.
And there's a little ring at the top.
But you know, that's my own experience. I'm certainly someplace that has, I think, far more fungal disease pressure
Right.
than a lot of other parts of the Bay Area.
So,
SHUCK split.
Okay.
Shuck.
Spell that out for everybody.
Shuck, you know, shucks.
Okay. So it's clear for everybody.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, what I was gonna say is the proper measure for cost of something on your peach tree, if you have peach leaf curl, is dollars per peach or dollars
Yeah.
per ton of peaches. It's
Mhm.
not anything else. Who cares what it costs? If it costs $100 and you get $300 worth of peaches.
Yeah. So I don't know the yields, so that's a harder figure to come up with.
is it, or rain influence? I mean, how do you time it relative to rainfall?
I would not do it right before a rainfall. So, you know, I mean, that would not be my choice.
I like personally for everything,
month.
for all fungal sprays to get at least 5 days. I mean, I'll look at the forecast and I'll spray if I've got 5 clear days after that.
Well, we get really good forecasts for the next 10 days. They're pretty good even 6
They're not-
to 10 days out.
And you're
pretty-
doing a straight spray, no surfactant in there?
No. I mean, I'll put, no, I'm using a surfactant.
Oh, okay.
And what's your favorite surfactant that you're able to get a hold
Doesn't
of?
matter. I mean, anything is fine.
So you can just buy that.
But
Like a detergent?
It's
It's a surfactant, it's like a
It's not me.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you, no, so a surfactant breaks the surface tension of water. So, you know, like when you wax your car and then the water beads up on it, well, you don't, leaves have wax too. And if you ever have sprayed something, a plant that has a waxy foliage, then the spray just beads up and rolls right off the leaf. You don't get any deposition whatsoever. So when you add a surfactant to it, it breaks it. It's not held as cohesive.
It's gonna be emulsified with.
Well, if you're using an oil or whatnot, but
So,
but it is like soap.
Well, it is. Dish soap.
Well, it
is
could
a
be dish-
surfactant
that
you
would be
use.
one
If you wanted
type.
to spray today and you didn't have any fancy surfactant, you
That would be you could go with that. But there are better surfactants. Some of these.
As
Yeah,
opposed to, is the
like what?
oil, is the oil also a surfactant or is it
No,
like that
no,
stick? They
no,
don't,
no.
like,
The
get it
oil.
perfect.
It,
oil is actually an active ingredient.
yeah, it's an active ingredient there. So, and that's not vegetable oil. You know, that's petroleum-based oil. You know.
So our surfactant is like the mediator between the two.
Well, so you could use a surfactant with the oil. In fact, you would have to have a surfactant with the oil to get it to mix with water. But if there was no oil in there, you still might want to use a surfactant. And that's because regular water can beat up on the plants and you're not getting an effective spray. The better there's some surfactants out there, these polytrisiloxanes or whatever, that you can spray the top of the leaf and it can wrap around the whole leaf. Yeah.
So what would be one that would be available to the average person?
Well, so like,
Monterey brand makes a spreader sticker you can buy at most any hardware store.
Isn't it spreader
That's what
sticker
it's called,
spreader sticker?
Well, there's both.
well, if it's a sticker, just a spreader, just get a surfactant, you know, so you can get, you know, like if you want a real natural way, yucca or whatever is a surfactant that a lot of people use. The soap bark plant, you know, is from down in South America, you know, so, and I actually found that product's insecticidal as well as being a surfactant. But, you know, so there are, these things can make any of your sprays better when you add a surfactant to it. Now think of like if you have broad mites or something that down in buds or whatever, if you don't have a surfactant, it's not going to penetrate down into those buds.
Covered with little webs or hairs, how they can get into the
Yeah, so the surfactant really helps get the spray into places where it's going to do the job. And, you know, one thing in terms of spraying, coverage is essential, you know, so the surfactant helps you get better spray coverage.
Yeah, just if you were using the soap berry with the all phase, what would that look like? Like, how would you combine them?
So the soap root or whatever. So you would have to find a product that. So I was thinking of coming up with a soap root product because it shows that it's exempt, but it turns out it's really not exempt. So like the soap root has like 50 plus different saponins in it. And one of those saponins is exempt. And it's used in like COVID, vaccines and stuff like that to give you a boosted immune response. But that one is exempt, but the price of that is just ridiculous. It's
South American soul fruit different from the California?
so you're thinking of, yeah, they're different. You're thinking of like the native saponin or whatever.
That they use for washing hair.
Yeah. I mean, that would have saponins in it too. It would probably work too, but it's not an exempt product. You'd have to go through a more rigorous type of registration. But while I was playing with it, those saponins actually are insecticidal.
They
But
smother insects like soap does, this dish soap. But at the end of Ron's presentation, I'd love to entertain more questions, especially about backyard little recipes and stuff, because I think that's another part of this discussion.
But let me ask one more question about something somebody said. They mentioned spreader sticker, and when Lilly was still selling the copper in this state, they always said, and buy our spreader sticker. What is the reason you don't want to use a sticker?
you can use this. I don't need it with my product. The carrageenan is the sticker, so it's not necessary.
It said, could you go back? You had a point there. Do not mix all phase with dormant oil.
Yeah, so in this case, they added all phase to Master Cop, and it did worse. The all phase did worse. That you would think, okay, give it with the copper and the all phase. Now we're going to get better results. But because it was mixed with oil,
look at the difference there. That's a big difference.
So the oil
6.8 to 25.8.
And I had no clue it did that, but the oil negated the potassium sorbate. But it could have been if you didn't use the oil and you mixed it with those, you would have gotten.
Well, is it because it couldn't get through the oil because the oil created?
I don't know if the oil binds to it somehow, and then it's just not able to do its job.
That's a pretty big organic molecule, isn't it? The sorbate.
Fairly big. It's not crazy big, but. This is powdery mildew, and I already knew it worked really well on like the strawberry and the grape powdery mildew, but this was on peaches, and we have tied for the lowest incidence of powdery mildew. So like if you're using it on your peaches, you're also getting powdery mildew control.
Well, it can be a big problem on nectarines too. I find that powdery mildew on nectarine fruit can be really bad.
So this is a post-harvest application, post-harvest brown rot of Fay Alberta peaches. So we had of the biologicals, we had a real low rate of inoculation. With this product, you could also use it after harvest. So you could use it as a tank dunk or spray to help, give you more shelf life after harvesting as well. And brown rot blossom blight, you'd spray for that in the spring. So like with monolina or what in looking at some studies that were done in laboratories, I calculated that to get the best results, I needed to be at 10 grams per gallon. But, 8 and 7 was still pretty effective. But that was one that had to be a little higher. And so, I'm still learning a lot about the product and what the potassium sorbate can do. There's, lab studies that show it working on all sorts of bacterial pathogens that you can see here that have been documented. with potassium sorbate.
Staphylococcus, Listeria, Salmonella.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are human type of bad pathogens. But, I think, if you have bacterial spots on orchids or other sort of plants, I think this would be a good product for you to use. And it also has a good fungicidal activity. And here's, different studies showing efficacy on like fusarium. And there's a number of studies that have shown efficacy with fusarium and rhizopus and botrytis.
Black molds. Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Brown rot.
I don't know all that it can do, but there's potential for a lot of diseases that affect plants. And of course, more research will help there. All phase also, if you do integrated pest management, it's not going to harm your beneficials. And ladybugs and all that stuff, they're unfazed by it. So, you can spray away. You're not going to now get a secondary outbreak of spider mites or whatever because you've, knocked off predators or whatnot. It integrates well. And I think there's some interesting, I think potassium sorbate could be insecticidal, but in a different sort of way. And I haven't been able to do a controlled study on this, but I've had some people tell me like, oh, I killed my aphids. And I'm like, nah, it didn't kill your aphids. You used my other product, my peppermint oil product. And then I had some other people tell me it killed their aphids. And so I started to think, could that be true? So I researched, I thought, well, what if it killed their gut bacteria? Because it's a bactericide. And I know it's systemic. So one of those studies, previous studies there, where they were showing efficacy against like fusarium, there was a study where they sprayed tomato seedlings, the foliage, and then they inoculated them with different root pathogens, like the fusarium, and they got control from the foliar sprays over fusarium. So that's indicating it's moving through the plant down to the roots and protecting the roots. So if an aphid is feeding in the phloem or whatever, it could be imbibing potassium sorbate. It could kill off its gut bacteria. I started a search on Google Scholar, and I found that years ago, UC Davis had done a study where they had eliminated the gut bacteria totally on aphids, and they would die. And part of the reason that they have the gut bacteria is to break down phytochemicals. So plants, they produce all these sort of phytochemicals to ward off, insects and things that would feed on them. So these gut bacteria can break those down, and that's why some aphids can grow on this plant, but not on this other one, et cetera. So I think that's a possibility. So, I mean, now that I want to kind of do that test, I'm having trouble getting aphids, but when you don't want them, they're there. When you want them,
So, but in mammals, it doesn't affect soil gut health?
Apparently not. It's a food preservative for us. So, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. And if you do use the product and you observe some sort of things that are, that might be, that's a that. And the cool thing about that would be it wouldn't be affecting your predators or your parasitoids. So you could spray, and these people said it was like a week to 10 days delayed response. Like they thought the aphids, it just made the aphids kind of move around a lot, So that would indicate maybe they starved or something, or I don't know, but just an interesting possibility. I just want to throw that out there. I don't sell it as an insecticide, but I think it possibly is. So, and that would be a totally novel mode of action for controlling insects. So that this Circadian Sunrise right here. So, I told you I had done that consulting for the cannabis operation. Well, I thought, man, that peppermint oil and whatnot, it killed the spider mites like that. The powdery mildew, they had bad powdery mildew and it got rid of the existing, it was a good eradicant. And, most products.
There's prevention and there's eradication. So he's saying once you had it bad, it can stop it.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, once you have it, and you could get to a point where if you left it on there for a month, then nothing's going to touch it. But a couple of weeks old, it was eradicating it. But they were burning their plants, and you could tell the plants were stunted. So I thought about that was combined with a biostimulant. So I thought I'll combine it with a biostimulant. And I looked for the biostimulant I was thinking of is something called tricontinol. So tricontinol, it's in alfalfa and some other sort of things. And it was patented by Michigan State University as a plant biostimulant like in 1977. And so, if they believed in it, they probably, that's why they patented it. I was a little skeptical, but I did some work with tricontinol, and I could see it helped the plants in a number of different ways. So then I had to I wanted to find tricontinol in something that was EPA exempt. And because then I wouldn't have to register it. And so I started researching it, and I found out that it's in the germ of corn, and it's oil soluble. So it's in the germ of corn, and it's oil soluble. It's probably going to end up being in corn oil. So I went to the store, bought some corn oil, sent it off to a lab in Iowa because UC Davis couldn't do it.
They know a lot about corn in Iowa.
They know a lot about corn in Iowa. So I sent it back there, and they said, no tricontinol. I'm like, it has to be there. And then, I looked into more of the refining process. Yeah. And I have to tell you, the corn oil you get in the store, they've stripped everything out of it. Everything. And so I started to look at raw corn oil and what's in raw corn oil. And raw corn oil almost has as much antioxidants as blueberries. Not quite, but it's up there, raw corn oil. And so I thought, well, all those antioxidants and stuff, those are good for plants too. That's why they're there for plants, not us. I mean, it helps us too, but the plants produce the antioxidants for the plant. And I contacted a company in the Midwest. I asked them if I could get some of they call it crude corn oil. And they gave me some samples, and I shipped it off to the lab, and voila, there's tricontinol. And there's all these other good things in there. So I thought, okay, let's combine this with the peppermint oil now, and let's see if we can stunt the plants. They grew better. And with cannabis, it was incredibly better. So,
when you're working with these kinds of products, you're looking at the high end, like what makes the most money? Greenhouse growing, cannabis, wine industry. This is where the money is. This is where the research is. And this is where you can say, we can increase your profits greatly. And you can make a business out of this. And very exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, so it totally negated the bad effects. I mean, in fact, I could spray this in full sunlight, midday, as long as it's not 100 degrees outside. And, that wouldn't be my recommendations, but I was doing that. And then I later found out it's compatible with sulfur. So most horticultural oils, if you use sulfur and then use a horticultural oil, you'll burn your leaves. This, you could tank mix it with sulfur and it will not burn your leaves. So if you have somebody that is using sulfur for one purpose and they would just love to use a horticultural oil, but they know they've used the sulfur, this one they could do it. It's no problem at all. But the fatty acids that are in corn oil, plants produce them as an energy source. They're also part of the cell membrane, so they can incorporate it into their structure. They can metabolize it. It has twice the calories per gram as sugars. So because I later found out that actually increasing the tricontinol even more didn't help, and that I could even lower it, and that a lot of these other things are doing a lot of work in the product, like the amino acids and the other antioxidants. Tricontinol is an antioxidant, but you could Google Scholar or that tricontinol, you'd find some interesting stuff with the tricontinol. So the peppermint oil is really broad spectrum. It's a nerve toxin for insects. So, we have acetylcholinesterase. Insects have a different type of acetylcholinesterase, and it will affect insect acetylcholinesterase, but not ours. It affects something called octopamine, which is like a neurobehavioral type of thing going on with the insects. So you can get like a kill just like with the organophosphates with the peppermint oil. And it gets the mites, it gets the aphids, and it gets the fungi. So really broad spec.
There's a neurotoxin that works on the other things. Oh,
So yeah, with insects and mites, it's a neurotoxin. Actually, it affects our nerves too. So that you can go to the store and buy menthol cream, and if you have an ache or pain, you can rub that menthol into your back, and it will block nerves. So it's not going to kill us or whatever, and we eat the stuff, but it does affect our nerves as well. But with the insects, it'll kill them. And the corn oil, it just provides an additional smothering sort of activity to the product. So it ended up,
you said the mode of action was nerves, and then what's the mode of action on fungus?
I do not know, but
Oils in general are used to control powdery mildew.
Yeah, a lot of oils are, but it's actually better than like using those refined oils for powdery mildew. There's detergents in here because I got to have the oil mixed with water. I primarily use potassium oleate, which oleic acid is in butter and stuff like that. So there's a potassium salt of that.
Is that allowed in organic?
Yeah, this one's OMRI certified. So, the OMRI, it's a bit of a process, and it costs over $1,000 just to get a review.
So the OMRI stands for the Organic Materials Review Institute, and if you're a certified organic grower, the National Organic Program requires that you only use products for pest control or anything really that's certified under that listing as acceptable. And it's controversial because there's things in there that are a little chemically, and there's things that seem supernatural that aren't allowed. Supernatural, you know what I'm saying?
Arsenic is a natural compound.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah.
So there is some controversy there with everything, but the point is that it's a process that's expensive, and only bigger corporations are usually able to do it. I'm really pleased to see that this product got certified, and although perhaps all phases isn't yet, it's different. What's unique about these two, I want you to touch on, and we're kind of wrapping up soon.
Yeah, I can whenever.
Is that these products are EPA exempt. Could you explain a little bit about the generally regarded as safe list in that exempt list of ingredients that you were kind of pulling out of?
Yeah.
These products are not regulated in the same way as most pesticides are. They're under a special exempt status because they have such non-toxic ingredients.
Well, so the EPA, they came up with a list. They said, these sort of things have been studied so much that we don't feel that it's maybe right to have you spend $1 million, analyzing what, we all know from all these studies. So we'll exempt these certain materials, and you can make pesticides with these materials, and you get an easier track of getting your product to market. And so there's still a bunch of compliance things that you have to go through, but it's way easier than the alternative. He touched that the EPA label says that it's the law that you have to follow the label, and that's true. Turns out, I like getting this product registered in Oregon and Washington. I had on my label, it is the law to follow the label. And they said, you can't put that on your label. And I said, what? And they said, it's not an EPA, it's not EPA registered, it's exempt, meaning that it is not the law that you have to follow the label. So, I probably shouldn't even tell you that. But, he kind of brought that up earlier. And so, I would follow the labels because, I've developed the product, and I've put a lot of thought into the product, and I've paid for research, and I've done my own research. So I have my own ideas on how to best use the product. But if you had a niche use that you wanted to use it on, there's no law that says you can't use it on that niche use. And you cannot over apply to the point where you get illegal residues. So with other products, you have to be concerned about spraying too close to harvest or applying it at too high of a rate or whatever, and it's then testing as exceeding legal limits. These residues are not considered to be a pesticide.
So there's, even organic pesticides that are certified OMRI certified, like this is the spinosad that Monterey manufactures. There's 40 pages in the booklet here of how to use this properly, including reentry, clothing that you have to use to protect yourself. Anything you spray, you shouldn't breathe. You don't want to get it in your eyes. And this is an example of another type of exempt product that has ingredients, similarly things that are, botanical oils like cloves, rosemary, and then those other adjuvants like the polyglycerol oleate, lauric acid, things that help the oils spread out, like you were talking about. So this is the contrast. When I'm working with farmers, I have to do pesticide trainings, even for organic stuff, with all the farmers on how to be safe in the fields with these. This is totally exempt. These products are totally exempt. So as a farmer and a backyard person, it's another kind of generation. And I've seen several new products, including Ron's. What I love about Ron's, though, is that the research is behind it. He was at Davis for 27 years. And so you've got all this support and consistent testing, so you can make these comparisons, and it's.
But let me try to blast through a few things. So this was a study, I think it was on bunch rot, and it was sprayed at bloom. This was on grapes, pre-close, and for raisins when they start turning color, and then they harvested when they were ripe. And so it had even applied that far from harvest, it did have a significant effect on controlling the botrytis. But with generally, you're going to see a real quick kill. I wanted to tell you about this product. This is kind of like this, but without the peppermint oil. So it can be a lot cheaper type of product, but I came to believe in the biostimulants. And so I changed the amino acid profile on this somewhat. I mean, these are some of the amino acids in the product.
So it's the raw corn oil base.
It's a raw corn oil base. It's been augmented to increase proline. Proline is a real important amino acid for helping plants deal with drought and cold and stuff like that. And so I used this. I used all these products first in a field trial in 2023. This was in Vacaville, but I did it post veraison. So it was after they were turning color. And I sprayed it at temperatures in the morning on days where it got up to 100 degrees. It was like the worst way but I wanted to see if I could affect the flavor of the grapes. I didn't want to say, use my all phase there on your grapes, and then it does something funny, that they pick up some weird taste. So I figured if I did it late and right close to harvest, if they didn't pick up anything weird then, they're not going to pick up anything weird, period. So I then made it into wine myself. And so I'm not a great winemaker, but I did do this in my garage. And then I had all these sample bottles, and I took them to different sommeliers and wineries and had the winemakers give me their feedback on everything. So the ProLifix, the one that's doesn't have the peppermint oil in it, but it has all the tricontinol, that one, really good results. The all phase, no funky taste or anything like that. The long shell, this is a cinnamon oil product I have. That kind of, there was something there. Of course, it was made close to within 2 weeks of harvest. And the Circadian had a little weird, maybe something that not everyone picked up on, but these guys have taste buds like a bloodhound, So, I'm totally confident with people using this ProLifix or the all phase. And you probably could get away with these two earlier on. And this, yeah, the cinnamon oil is really great for mealybugs. If you ever have mealybugs, that wax that's on them, boom, it just dissolves it like that.
That's the one shadow.
But then this last year, this is in Fairplay, California, and he dry farms. So he does zero irrigation. So I know he's got plants that have some drought stress. I also know he's an excellent winemaker because I tasted his wines. So I said, I would like to treat some of your rows with this biostimulant product. I think it'll help them with their deal with drought. And I said, I think it might improve their flavors. And so, he let me do it. And so this is his orchard right there. And this is, early on. And I did 3 rows, and then these are the 3 rows that we were going to compare to right next to it. I sprayed, initially when they just came out, I sprayed one time when the flowers were getting ready to open up. And I did the last spray was when I had little pea-size fruit, and that was it, 3 applications. And, early on, like in August, by August, I already was almost 2 bricks higher in the treated. So it was maturing, quite a bit faster than the other one. And then it started to catch up, the other one. It's like this one reached a peak and kind of sat there, the one that had the biostimulant. And then that's when it's maturing with flavors and stuff like that. And over time, the other one started to catch up, but it didn't quite catch up. And then when he harvested, this is the ProLifix treated, that's the non-ProLifix treated. So, a lot of growers might say, well, I might say, well, those are just water, but they had higher bricks. And they were at this higher bricks for a much longer period of time. Building flavors. So, I think he was pleased with that. He's going to make this into wine and this into wine, and we're going to do a comparison. But I think one thing that this might be really useful for would be getting people to reduce irrigation. So, I could say, let's cut back your irrigation 20%. And we'll use this product, and I think we can get the same yields. And then the next year, say, let's try for another 20%. And we'll see what the yields are like. And, maybe you could get to a point where you could dry farm, but maybe after 20%, you start cutting it 10%, and easing it down a little lighter. But the other thing, when you start conditioning your plants, like, so Ruggiero, who owns this winery, he weaned his plants over a number of years. But once you have your plants with this super deep root system, let's say the irrigation district says, man, there's drought, you just can't give you your allotment. Those plants are going to do way better than his neighbors that have just been irrigating, at the maximum amount all the time. They didn't need irrigation anyways. So, it would be so yeah, I'm thinking I need to try to work with some irrigation districts, et cetera, on that. But I think you get better quality, more yield, and we can reduce water use.
How many years minimum do you think that would be?
To
Land, like develop, it sounds like developing it into a land race, sort of, so to speak, over time, but like minimum number of years, 3, 5, 7.
I think it would depend on the land, for one thing. This guy's property is in the Sierra foothills. It's not deep soil. So I was surprised he could even dry farm there, but he did it, I think he did it over like 5 years. He was much more aggressive at it than I would be, and he didn't use a biostimulant. He just did it.
I have a question back onto all phase
Yeah.
before you wrap up. So since it's effective in killing pathological fungal organisms, does it have negative effect on the positive beneficial fungal organisms in the soil?
Well, so I get what you're talking about. We've been eating it for 80 years. So I think in our guts we're fine. Plant beneficial, that microflora there's a microbiome around the plant. And how it affects that microbiome, no one knows, I do know that if you applying it foliar and it moves down to the roots to protect against fusarium or something, pythium or something like that, that's a much less intrusive way than taking something as a soil drench and just drenching the heck out of your soil with a fungicide. There you're killing everything and you're creating a vacuum. Whereas if you can just have it down in the root system and whatever gets through your natural, biome down there, it meets potassium sorbate, slows it down. So then you're not killing off your soil biology. And I think the soil biology works really well at controlling diseases if you build the soil biology right. So like I think adding your compost to the soil, there's all sorts of beneficials in compost, especially if you get like from the bark of hardwood trees or from, fir trees or redwood. There's these trichoderma and gliocladium type of fungi that work really well in suppressing diseases. If you add a chitin source also to the soil, you amp that up. So, like if you add your crab meal or your insect frass or something like that, those fungi beneficial fungi are going to start breaking down that chitin, and they produce chitinases. And some of these chitinases are fungicides just in themselves. And they totally amp up the performance of your compost, what you're getting in the compost, you bring it up to another level that way. So I think by building your soil, you can control, a lot of plant pathogens.
Related to that, did you explain the mode of action on bacteria?
So, well, actually, it is cellular. It's the respiration and the metabolic processes. Yeah. So,
Potassium is a plant food. Is that adding to your yield?
so potassium could, but
When you think about the, what's the scale per acre? We're talking about
it's a
3
pretty
pounds per
pretty
acre
low
or-
amount. So like this one does not have as much potassium as that. So the ProLifix, so that one it's like less than 1%.
It's more corn oil based.
So it's more the corn oil. There is some potassium in it from
The adjuvants.
from like the potassium oleate, which is a emulsifier. So like when I do try using emulsifiers and putting things into the product, so like there's some baking soda in this product too, but it's not baking soda, it's potassium bicarbonate rather than sodium bicarbonate because I don't want the potassium salt or the sodium salt, I want the potassium salt. So when everything I try to put in the products, I try to put in that are going to be good. So I'm all used to using pesticides my whole life that you don't want in the environment. So it turns out like after like having these original goals for all this stuff, I find that there's, this movement for regenerative agriculture, where instead of being sustainable, you're actually moving beyond sustainability to improving the site, leaving it better than you found it.
And thriving.
Yeah, so you're leaving it better than you found it. So I'm like thinking, you know what? That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm adding biostimulants. I'm trying my best to put things in there that are going to be good for the plants and the land and the environment and the people. And by cutting out the sulfur or cutting back on the sulfur, you're helping the farming community out. You're helping with acid rain because that sulfur dioxide is going to fall over the Rockies someplace. So I call them regenerative
Okay,
pesticides.
exponential ecosystem services.
Yeah, so there's some other things. So that's it. I think it can improve the quality. You obviously get earlier ripening. So if you're worried about frost, drought resistance is well documented with proline and with the tricontinol. And we saw that with those freeze resistance. Proline is used in cryogenics for plants. So when they freeze plant materials and herbariums and stuff, they'll treat them with proline. So I think it could help with, dealing with frost. I think you could grow crops at higher altitudes because they're going to ripen sooner.
Grow tropical crops in the Bay Area.
Well, possibly that sort of thing.
I want to say something, and I know most of the people in the room know this, and I don't want to presume that they don't. I think they most do, but for those who don't, linoleum is made out of oil, and oleate, this root of the word OLE, is oil.
Well, so there's not all oils are petroleum based.
No. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
The soap is made until the invention of detergents by taking lard or
Tallow.
suet, tallow, some kind of fat. That's where the oleum comes. Linoleum's made from linseed oil, and cooking it with lye, which is sodium, and then you get sodium and all these oilates. So potassium oilate is soap.
Yeah, so it is a type of soap. And this product here also we make our own soap, and we make it from the crude corn oil. So the soap in here is made from the crude corn oil, and instead of using sodium hydroxide, I use potassium hydroxide. Because once again, I want to put something good in there rather than the sodium. So there is soap in this product, and we make it, that's how we make it. But
A few more questions, and we'll wrap up.
At the beginning of your presentation, you had said you made an insectary in the greenhouse.
yeah. So okay, well, if you wanted, real
That's a
quick.
whole nother talk we could have
So-
over here for.
So leaf miners were a big problem with the cucurbids, and Mike Perella, I could see down in UC Riverside at the time, was rearing this Dacnusa sibiricus and Diclyphus acifia, two parasitoid wasps. And I went down and visited him. I saw his insectary, how he was doing that. He gave me the wasps, and then I went up and raised them in a greenhouse. I made cages just out of like insect screen and with this like window screen, and put it in there, put them all together, put things in for hands, or whatnot, and and was raising them like that. Then Ken Hagen in Albany, research USDA, he, I was like, the aphids are what's taking us down, before anything else. And their ability to breed is just ridiculous. And
Live birth, multiple generations,
Yeah.
no males needed.
yeah, so it's just kind of ridiculous. So he suggested that I raise a grain aphid. And I raised a grain aphid on wheat, and the grain aphid only attacks grains. It will not attack my tomatoes. It won't attack my peppers. It won't attack my cucumbers. But he said the parasite of that, this Lysophlebus testaciepes, it hits over 300 different species of. So what you do, you raise these, and then you put them out in your greenhouse. And then once the other pest one comes in, you already have a population of parasitoids in your greenhouse. And unlike aphid or ladybugs, they need to eat, like 30 grams worth of aphids or something like that before they start reproducing. Or, whereas these, they just need one. They stab it, and each one can hit like 100 aphids, and then those are all going to hatch
Well,
out.
ladybugs are predators, so they need to eat the live prey, whereas a parasitoid, or you're saying it better than me, they eat something else and they're just laying their eggs into the pest. So that's a totally different thing.
The predators.
So I'm banking the predators on a pest that's not going to harm my crop. And that same sort of tactic could be used in many crops. And another one I could have used would be a cabbage aphid. That's only going to get cole crops. So if I was growing wheat, I could use cabbage to, or whatever. So you can find different pests that can be another host, and you could introduce those to your, and I see that in cover crops a lot of times. Like I was in Napa this last year, and I was looking at some of their cover, and I could see they did have a cole type of crop in with their cover material, and I was looking at it, and I was seeing the aphids on there and some parasitization. And I was thinking, yeah, these guys got it going on. These are going to be the.
How do you sustain the parasitoids in the greenhouse?
So once they're in the greenhouse, the aphids that are on there, they're still going to be, giving some birth and reproducing and getting parasitized. But then I would produce clean plants that would be protected by insect screens so they wouldn't get parasitized. And then I could introduce those clean aphids, those aphids without any parasite, and just put them out in the greenhouses.
So you raise aphids to feed them.
I raised aphids to feed the wasps, and so I've told a number of people, like I have a friend who owns Sound Horticulture. They're up in Washington, and I was telling her about that, and now she's selling that product where she'll sell you the aphids, the grain aphids. So even if you don't have the parasitoid, if you put the aphids out there, they're going to not just be they could feed lacewings, they could feed, minute pirate bugs, they could be feeding all sorts of beneficials out there. So she took it to a different level. Well, it'll feed everything, and it won't be affecting your crop unless you're growing, grain in that
They're
case.
very specific to aphids. Any more questions for Ron? I got a couple points as we close. Go ahead.
I have a question about your corn oil that you use. Is that non-GMO?
It's non-GMO. Yeah, I actually specified that. I didn't think it would be the first batch I got was GMO, but then I asked, I thought I was probably not going to be able to get it. And they said, oh yeah, we do one run every month that's non-GMO. I said, cool. And they said, but this is the price. And I said, yeah, not so cool, but that's okay. But, I feel kind of good about supporting those farmers that are doing the non-GMO corn. And I have to pay more for it, but, I think my customers appreciate that. And I appreciate supporting those farms. So I'm totally cool with, and you're right. You could possibly even pick up some glyphosate or something like that in, some of the GMO type of corn oil. So, and especially if it was raw,
Have you thought about writing a book based on your experience to date about the methodologies and considerations?
I'm so busy. I mean, I'm supposedly retired, but, I
So is she a volunteer now?
Yeah, there you go. Scribe.
Yeah, it's a tough industry. Okay, so the big farmers, they go through their pest control advisors. The pest control advisors are hired by Wilbur Ellis or Grow West, and they're the big pesticide manufacturers. They will only recommend their products. They're not going to recommend my product for anything. And so that's who the farmer goes through. So I have to somehow get around the PCAs that they have and try to get them to buy, from me, or if, Grow West gets enough farmers demanding for it, then Grow West could then carry the product. But they're not going to carry the product without the people asking for it. So that's kind of like the situation I'm in with those people. So, I mean, I'm working with some small growers like you see, but to really get into the big boys, get by them, it's problematic. I'm not a millionaire,
Well, you've got a patent on the one
I do
product,
have a patent.
and what happens in the industry, they see a little success from a guy like you, and then they try to take it apart and redo it themselves and get their own patent and copy you. That's what's going to happen.
Well, that's probably what's going to happen. But, actually with the all phase, I would be perfectly, I mean, I would think it's kind of a bummer if, I can't get any profit off of that. But if I could change the industry, I would be happy. I would really be, I would think, damn, I accomplished something.
So let me interject here and wrap up and say two things to wrap up. One is I was unsure about the appropriateness of us having Ron selling stuff here at the public library. It's a nonprofit thing. But I've heard that perhaps there might be some product for sale in the trunk of his car. So I want to support Ron, whether you're ordering online, again, free shipping. I don't know how this guy does it, but he has some product here today of all three of these, or just the two?
I have, I just have the two products. Yeah. So, I mean, I think you would really like to play with the ProLifix product.
Sounds really interesting.
Because, I mean, having those biostimulants and the amino acids, I think would be fun, I find it fun, when I'm doing these things with the grapes or whatever. I think it's fun, exciting to see what happens. So, and that one is way more affordable than this. This one you're probably going to pay,
The peppermint and cinnamon oils cost a lot of money.
The cinnamon I can get a lot cheaper than the peppermint oil. But the cinnamon, I can't totally take away the phyto. Cinnamon is inherently phytotoxic some of the terpenes in there are found in burn down products for weed control. So, but the cinnamon, it is different chemistry. And for certain pests, it's really superior. I mean, like the mealybugs, for instance. I mean, dang, it worked. I mean, I fought mealybugs in some plant collections for years, and I've never seen anything work as well as the cinnamon oil. And that includes things like Temic and, things that are outlawed these days,
So we're gonna visit Ron out in the parking lot. And first, let's just give Ron a round of applause for his work, for the presentation today. Thanks so much, Ron. I also wanted to acknowledge that we're all experimenters. We're all citizen scientists. And there's a lot of things that are traditional or alternative. And I want to just put a plug for that. What I appreciate about Ron is science-based. He's got all the backup and everything. But I also want to put a plug in with traditions and alternatives and things that maybe we don't quite understand how they work, but they work for us. And so I want to acknowledge other ways like biodynamics, or just playing around with what do they call it? The EM, effective microorganisms, which is a lactobacillus-based strategy. But I also want to just put a shout out because I've heard some reports about using something as simple as a compost tea or lactobacillus products to help control things like peach leaf curl. And I've heard that you guys at the Mother Orchard nearby here had an interesting experience last year using something like that, a lactobacillus kind of a strategy.
Yeah, we use Lactobacillus EM3 and yeah, we put that on our plants there were some that were looking really infected, and it's unclear, like some have like totally recovered. It looks like some might have come back, but all of them had extreme like leaf growths, and the trees were just so much healthier. And the majority of them, like from the very first time we sprayed them, they like completely turned around like really quickly. And then we sprayed for 5 sprays. I feel like we sprayed more than that. 5 or 6. I think it was just a few times, like 3 or 4 months. I feel like yeah, we spaced it out over months, just trying to really boost the plant's immune system. And then like some were just totally repaired, no problem at all. Some had seen a little bit of like regrowth, but I mean these were like really badly infected.
You see it.
Yeah.
What I like about this idea, what Ron's talking about, what we do in our backyards is plant health as a general subject.
Yeah.
Because the pest and disease are certainly attracted to weaker plants and imbalances. So if we can work on balancing our soil health, balancing the irrigation techniques, but using these extra little tricks, these bio-stimulants that we're talking about, can really help us, I think, in many ways. So
if you try something, take before and after photos and document what you do.
please, and then let's start sharing more of those successes, both with products like Ron's. Here's a great handout specifically on the different peach tree diseases at all phase. Take one of these on your way out, and let's chase them down in the parking lot if we want to get some of this stuff.